Welcome to the complete Batman history. After the release of Batman Returns and Batman the Animated Series in 1992, the Batman franchise entered a new era. Thanks to the growing popularity of the character, Warner Bros. Was able to produce another theatrical movie based on the animated show, and DC Comics started the most ambitious project ever seen in the Batman comics. 1993 is a year full of changes in the history of Batman, and this is how it all happened. The first season of Batman the Animated Series consisted of 65 episodes, 45 of which premiered in 1992. The remaining 20 episodes of the season premiered in 1993, and they featured outstanding adaptations of classic Batman comics, such as the episode The Laughing Fish, which adapted classic Joker stories from the Bronze Age of comics, as well as the two-part episode The Demon's Quest, which adapts the first Ra's al Ghul story. However, the most notable episode adaptation of the year is Robin's Reckoning Part 1, which adapts the first appearance and origin story of Robin from Detective Comics number 38. The episode follows Batman and Robin as they come across the criminal gang of Tony Zuko, the man responsible for the death of Dick Grayson's parents. The tragic origin story of Dick Grayson and his adoption by Bruce Wayne is told through flashbacks that illustrate the mature storytelling and the profound characterization that Batman the Animated Series became known for. Back then, this was the only television program made for kids that dealt with serious issues such as blackmail, extortion, child endangerment, and death. To avoid censorship, the creators of the series developed smart and creative ways to portray the more mature events of the stories, and this excellent display of craftsmanship earned this episode an Emmy Award for Most Outstanding Program. Among the final episodes of the season, the most notable is the two-part episode Shadow of the Bat, which features the first appearance and introduction of Batgirl, a character that no longer existed in the main Batman comics at the time. The presence of Batgirl in the animated series played an important role in keeping the character relevant in the mainstream media, giving fans of Batgirl hope for her eventual return to the comics. Batman the Animated Series is the most popular Batman product of 1993, and it was only a matter of time before the series was adapted into a video game. In November of 1993, the video game company Nintendo released the very first Batman the Animated Series video game, developed by Konami for the Game Boy console. Just like most Batman video games before it, this is a side-scrolling action-adventure platform video game. This game is quite notable for being the first Batman video game that allows players to control a different character other than Batman, as Robin is also playable for a couple of levels. The gameplay is fairly simple. Batman and Robin move across the levels, walking, jumping, picking up lives, and punching or using batarangs to beat enemies. Though Batman and Robin share this core set of movements, they had one different ability from each other. Batman could use the bat rope to climb high ledges, while Robin could grab onto the ceiling and crawl around. The game also introduced a new mechanic never seen before in Batman video games, and that's the ability of Batman and Robin to wall jump in order to reach higher ground. The story of the game follows Batman and Robin as they work together to stop the evil plans of some of the most notable villains of Gotham City. The video game makes use of all the important villains from the animated show, including Scarecrow, Catwoman, the Penguin, Poison Ivy, Mr. Freeze, and the Joker. The evil plans of each villain are original plots written for the game, and only the Poison Ivy stage is based on the episode Pretty Poison, adapting her plan to eliminate Harvey Dent and even featuring her iconic giant Venus flytrap. The game was met with mostly positive reviews from critics and fans, who enjoyed the nice-looking visuals as well as the music that adapted the iconic soundtrack from the animated show. Though some critics found the game too easy to complete as the main enemies didn't provide a real challenge, the game was still one of the most enjoyable gaming experiences of 1993. The first season of Batman the Animated Series was met with an overwhelming positive reception, and as a result, Warner Bros. Started working on a direct-to-video movie based on the show. In the early stages of this project, the idea was to make a movie about Batman being taken to Arkham Asylum, where he would face a court consisting of his most iconic enemies. For multiple reasons, this idea was scrapped, and instead it was turned into the episode Trial from the second season in 1994. Warner Bros. Then assigned the writer and producer Alan Burnett to write the movie. Burnett wanted to do a love story connected to the origin of Batman, both themes that had not been explored in the 65 episodes of the first season. Other writers of the series joined the project, and borrowing many elements from the 1987 Batman comic called Batman Year 2, they began production in the movie that would be called Batman. Mask of the Phantasm. The movie follows Bruce Wayne as he is reunited with his one true love, a woman called Andrea Beaumont, who comes back to Gotham City after 10 years. Andrea was the woman that would have prevented Bruce from becoming Batman, as they were engaged and Bruce was ready to drop his quest in order to marry her. Unfortunately, Andrea had to leave Gotham to escape from the mob as a result of her father's businesses with the gangsters of Gotham. At the same time, Batman has to deal with a new vigilante, who is killing the old gangsters, creating a direct connection between Andrea Beaumont, her father, and the mysterious Phantasm. The production of the film lasted for 8 months, a record time for an animated feature, which was only possible thanks to the already expert team of creators of the animated series. However, when a Warner executive watched the 3D animated opening of the movie, he was so blown away that he decided that this small direct-to-video movie would be better as a theatrical film. This meant that the creative team would need to adjust the visuals of the movie to fit a theatrical release, putting the production team of the movie under a lot of pressure. Eventually, and without any delays on the schedule, Batman: Mask of the Phantasm was released on December of 1993.
This Mask of Phantasm is some kind of movie.
So I've heard, sir, so I've heard.
But unfortunately, it became the first major commercial failure of the Batman franchise since 1989. The box office of $5 million was an absolute loss for a movie with a budget of $6 million. The movie lasted less than a month in theaters, and all of this is likely due to the fact that the movie was not properly promoted. Though this was a theatrical film, the marketing campaign of the movie was practically non-existent, with only a handful of action figures, a couple of novelizations, and the comic book adaptation. Nevertheless, the movie eventually found its audience when it was released for the multiple home video systems over the years. Despite being a commercial failure, Mask of the Phantasm was met with overwhelming positive reception, with both critics and fans enjoying every single aspect of the movie, which shows the excellent craftsmanship of the animated series honed to near perfection.
They could have made it like set up a huge detective story. Who did it? Who is the real Phantasm? And the reveal is when the movie stops. But what gave the movie like a meat, something to notice on rewatches and like really get into, is Bruce and Andrea's relationship. How just like the devastating heartbreak Bruce feels when she leaves him, and how their choices are ultimately made for them.
Over the years, Mask of the Phantasm has become a cult classic, with multiple fans and critics going as far as to call it the best Batman movie of all time.
My earliest memories of Batman: Mask of the Phantasm was seeing a review of it on YouTube. And how it was titled "The Best Batman Movie That No One Ever Watched" or something. It really showed me just how much I was missing out.
Though the movie did not reach the financial recognition it deserved, it still remains one of the highest achievements in the history of Batman. In the first half of the year, DC Comics was focused on developing the epic Nightfall storyline, which is why there are not many Batman graphic novels until September of 1993, when DC released Batman Houdini: The Devil's Workshop. This is an Elseworld story set in the early 20th century, where Batman teams up with the legendary escape artist Harry Houdini in order to stop a mysterious criminal who is abducting children and also his supernatural master. Batman Houdini is a horror story that was received with mostly average reviews, as people enjoy the atmosphere, the art style, the setting, and unusual collaboration with an actual historical figure, but many took issue with the plot, as they found it convoluted due to the mixing of the historical thriller and the horror genres. On that same month, DC published another Elseworlds that is much more memorable. Superman: Speeding Bullets tells the story of what would have happened if the spaceship in which Kal-El arrives to Earth was found by Thomas and Martha Wayne. This story answers the question of what if Bruce Wayne had the powers of Superman. The story shows us a Kryptonian Batman trying to find his place in the world until he embraces his full potential. The story blends the Batman and Superman mythos in order to create a shared universe that is very much engaging as it is bizarre. Since this is primarily a Superman story, many elements of the Batman mythos are downplayed, which is why the story has been met with mixed reviews. In October, DC published the first Legends of the Dark Knight Halloween special. This was the first collaboration between writer Jeff Loeb and artist Tim Sale, and they delivered one of the best Batman Halloween specials of all time. The story takes place on the Halloween weekend, when Batman has to go after the Scarecrow to put an end to his evil plans. The original title of the story was Choices, but it has been recently retitled as Fears. Both titles make a lot of sense, as the story emphasizes the choices that Bruce Wayne has made and the fears that have come as a result of those choices. The story has been met with mostly positive reviews, with people enjoying the most fitting art of Tim Sale for a horror story and the writing of Jeff Loeb, which has been praised for the excellent depiction of Batman and Scarecrow. This was Loeb's first Batman work and perhaps the strongest debut of any modern Batman writer. With this story, Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale became one of the best Batman creative teams, as their chemistry is evident in the concepts and visuals of the story, which is considered by many one of the best Scarecrow stories of all time. Also in October, DC Comics released Batman: Two-Face Strikes Twice. This is an experimental publication that leans on the duality of the iconic Batman villain Two-Face. This is a 2-issue miniseries, but the twist is that each issue is divided in 2 parts. The first parts of each issue are flashbacks, told in the style of the Golden Age comic books of the 1940s, with cover art by the legendary Golden Age Batman artist Dick Sprang and interior art by Joe Staton. The second parts of each issue are modern stories, set in the main continuity of the 90s Batman comics and completely illustrated with sequential paintings by artist Derek Gross. The writer of both stories is Mike W. Barr. Two-Face Strikes Twice follows Batman's confrontation with Two-Face on 2 different occasions. The first one happened early in his career, when Dick Grayson was Robin, and the second time happens later on, with Tim Drake as the new Robin. Two-Face's evil plans are very similar in both occasions, but while in the past his plans were cartoony and harmless, in the present his methods become a bit darker but still quite silly. Mike Barr used this miniseries to make a commentary about the differences between the Golden Age and the 90s comic books, but the harmless tone of the story doesn't work quite well, especially not with the modern storytelling. The writing lacks depth and it makes the whole story feel shallow and pointless, which is why it has received mostly average reviews. In November, DC published Batman: Dark Joker, The Wild, an Elseworld story that takes the Batman mythos into a mystical world of fantasy and dark magic. In this medieval universe, the Joker is a powerful evil wizard who wants total control over the Wild, the place where the innocent people live and their only hope is the monstrous creature known as the Batman. Dark Joker: The Wild was written by Doug Moench and illustrated by Kelly Jones, the same creative team that gave us the excellent Batman and Dracula, Brett Rain. Unfortunately, Dark Joker was not as successful, as it was met with mixed reviews. Though the art was praised as one of the highlights, people generally disliked the concept and the story, which were not engaging or interesting enough. The only true outstanding feature of the story was the lettering work by Todd Klein, which earned him the Eisner Award for Best Lettering in 1994. In December, DC published Batman: In Darkest Night, another Elseworlds graphic novel which asks the question, what if Batman was Green Lantern? The story was written by Mike W. Barr and illustrated by Jerry Bingham, the same creative team that gave us Batman: Son of the Demon. In Darkest Night was met with mostly mixed reviews, as people really enjoyed the concept of merging Batman and Green Lantern, but many criticized the pacing of the story for introducing too many elements in a few pages, and the Batman fans particularly did not enjoy the fact that the story essentially downplayed the Batman mythos in favor of the Green Lantern universe. Mike Barr dedicated the story to Bill Finger, the co-creator of both Batman and Green Lantern, but it's clear that even though they were created by the same person, they don't necessarily work well as a single character. And lastly, by the very end of the year, DC published the Batman Adventures: Mad Love, a one-shot graphic novel that was part of the Batman Adventure series and reveals for the first time the origin story of Harley Quinn. Thanks to the success of Batman the Animated Series, Harley Quinn slowly started to become one of the most interesting new characters introduced to the Batman mythos. In 1992, writer Paul Dini and artist Bruce Timm created Harley as a gimmick, and 1 year later, they collaborated to tell the origin story of Harleen Quinzel, a very young and a very pretty clinical psychologist who falls madly in love with her most dangerous patient, the Joker. Mad Love is a story told primarily through flashbacks that explains in detail the nature of the relationship between Joker and Harley, from Harley's early days as a psychology student to her first meeting with the Joker in Arkham Asylum and her eventual turn into a supercriminal, all for the love of one man. These flashbacks are combined with a modern story, where Harley creates the ultimate death trap for Batman in order to conquer the heart of her beloved Joker. Mad Love was a tremendous critical and commercial success, as it established the definitive origin story of Harley Quinn while delivering one of the greatest Batman stories of all time. Mad Love was met with overwhelming positive reception from critics and fans alike. The writing of Paul Dini strikes a perfect balance between deep characterization and fun adventure, while the art of Bruce Timm makes use of the simple, yet extremely effective style of the animated series. The story was so well received that it won the Eisner Award for Best Single Issue in 1994, and it was eventually adapted into an episode of the animated series. At the start of 1993, the sixth and final issue of Robin 3: Cry of the Huntress was published, ending the miniseries where Robin and the Huntress fight against the Russian and Chinese mafias of Gotham. This final issue features an epic showdown between the evil King Snake and the brutal KG Beast. Meanwhile, the Batman adventures remained one of the best ongoing series, reaching issue number 16 by the end of the year. The series, which was primarily written by Kelly Puckett and illustrated by Mike Parobeck, features some great stories for all ages with beautiful illustrations. The stories showcase some of the villains from the animated series, including the Scarecrow, Man-Bat, Killer Croc, Clayface, Talia, the Ventriloquist, and the Joker. Issue number 12 of the series features the first comic book appearance of Harley Quinn, making this the most important issue of the year. In the summer of 1993, DC Comics partnered with Comico, an independent comic book company, and they published the first Batman-Grendel crossover by Matt Wagner, the creator of Grendel. Wagner had created the story as early as 1991, but because Comico had filed for bankruptcy in 1990 and they owned half of the rights to the character of Grendel, he had to wait until 1993 to publish this epic two-part crossover. The story follows Batman as he tries to stop Grendel, who has come to Gotham and starts operating against the law. The main story arc is connected by the subplot of two women who live together and find themselves at odds when they each become involved with Batman and Grendel. The Batman and Grendel crossover has been met with mixed reviews. The fans of Matt Wagner's Grendel seem to be very pleased with this two-issue miniseries, but the Batman fans have criticized the story for being unnecessarily contrived, the art for being crude, and overall for being a disappointing experience, as it doesn't feature any of the more popular aspects of the Batman mythos. In the fall of 1993, DC collaborated with Fleetway Editions, and they created the second Batman and Judge Dredd crossover, called Vendetta in Gotham. The story was written by Alan Grant and John Wagner, the same writers of the first Batman Dredd crossover, with Cam Kennedy replacing Simon Bisley as the artist. The story takes place after the events of the first crossover, when Judge Dredd returns to Gotham and challenges Batman to a one-on-one brawl across the city. The fight is brutal, and at first it goes unexplained, until the motivations of Judge Dredd are explained and he reveals that he was saving Batman from a certain death at the hands of the Ventriloquist. Though it seems like a noble cause, Dredd's real motivation to save Batman is because the Dark Knight is going to be needed in the near future to save Mega City 1, the home of Judge Dredd. The book ends in this cliffhanger, setting the stage for the third and final crossover between the two heroes. However, such an ending is part of the reason why Vendetta in Gotham has received mixed reviews. Besides the anticlimactic ending, people have criticized the lack of a self-contained story, and they were also not happy with the art by Cam Kennedy, who was not nearly as good as Simon Bisley. Despite that, the writing is good enough and creates some interesting moments between the main characters. And finally, we have to talk about Showcase 93, a new anthology series that featured multiple stories with supporting characters of the DC Universe that was published throughout the year. The main feature of the series were the supporting characters and enemies of the Batman mythos, including Catwoman, Robin, Two-Face, Huntress, and Nightwing. All of the stories were written by Doug Moench, who was the main Batman writer at the time, while the art was provided by several different artists. The first 6 issues are part of a larger storyline involving Catwoman in the first 4 chapters and Robin in issues number 5 and 6. Issues number 7 and 8 feature a Two-Face story that is part of Nightfall, while issues number 9 and 10 feature the first meeting between Huntress and the new Batman. The final 2 issues feature Nightwing working together with Robin and providing closure to the opening storyline of the series. 1993 was a rare year for Batman's guest appearances, as he only appeared in issue number 12 of Black Condor. The reason why Batman was absent from other comics by DC was because Bruce Wayne was taken out of action during the Nightfall crossover, and it would have been weird to have Batman in other comic books but not in his own series. Legends of the Dark Knight kickstarts the year with the finale of Hot House, one of the greatest Poison Ivy stories of all time from issue number 43. Following that, writer Stephen Grant and artist Sean McManus created Turf, a two-part storyline from issues number 44 and 45. The topic of the storyline deals with a controversial and always relevant social problem that is racism in America, in one of the most direct and visceral approaches to this issue. After that, writer Doug Mensch and artist Ross Heath collaborated on the 4-issue storyline that they called Heat. The story tries to revamp the character of Catman into a psychotic serial killer, but the gruesome nature of the story and the fundamentally misogynistic plot, combined with horrendous characterization and mediocre art, are the reason why this is one of the most forgettable stories of the entire series. To celebrate Legends of the Dark Knight reaching the 50-issue landmark, DC published a single-issue story called Images, written by Denny O'Neil and illustrated by Brett Blevins. Images is the new version of Batman and Joker's first meeting, which is heavily inspired by the first appearances of the Joker back in the golden age of comics. The story is one of the best of the year, and it was published along with a number of pin-up illustrations by several notable artists. The cover of the issue was done by Brian Bolland, and it's such an iconic illustration that it earned him the Eisner Award for Best Cover Artist in 1994. Issue number 51 features the first post-crisis team-up between Batman and Ragman, with cover art by the legendary Joe Kubert. Issues number 52 and 53 present the story called Tao, which reveals some of the training that Bruce Wayne did to become Batman. The remarkable thing about Tao is the unique art style of Arthur Ranson. Issue number 54 features a story called Sanctum by Dan Raspler and Mike Mignola. Sanctum is a supernatural horror story that seems like it was taken from the pages of an H.P. Lovecraft story, perfect for a Halloween night. The next story is Watchtower, a 3-issue adventure by writer Chuck Dixon and artist Michael McMahon. The story takes place in a possible future, where Batman fights crime as a 50-year-old man. Unfortunately, the ultra-simplistic art style and the shallow writing make this the worst storyline of the year. Finally, there's the Legends of the Dark Knight Annual number 3, which is part of the weird and complicated Bloodlines event, where basically alien monsters come to Earth to feed on humans, but they also activate mutant genes in some people, creating strange metahumans that are all introduced in the annuals of the year. The Legends of the Dark Knight Annual number 3 introduces Cardinal Sin and Samaritan. The Batman Annual number 17 introduces Ballistic. The Detective Comics Annual number 6 introduces Geist, and the Shadow of the Bat Annual number 1 introduces Joe Public. Though the intention of introducing all of these new characters was to revitalize the DC universe, none of these characters became relevant in any way, shape, or form. Meanwhile, in Shadow of the Bat, writer Alan Grant was in charge of creating some of the most unique and bizarre stories of the year, starting in issue number 10 with a story called The Thane of Gotham, which follows Batman as he goes into a medieval castle in Gotham City. The story was done in collaboration with artist Mike Collins, with great results. Issues number 11 and 12 feature a story called The Human Flea, which sees the return of Mortimer Cadaver and the creation of a new character called The Human Flea. Alan Grant collaborated in this one with artist Vince Giarano, whose style is very weird to say the least. Issue number 13 features the most powerful story of the entire year called The Nobody, in which Alan Grant provides a masterclass in the writing and characterization of Batman, which is only elevated by the return of artist Norm Breyfogle for this special story. Issues number 14 and 15 feature a story called Gotham Freaks, which brings back the forgotten Bronze Age Batman villain known as Mirage. Alan Grant collaborated in this one with artist Joe Staton, and this 2-part story was the final entry of the series before Shadow of the Bat was completely absorbed by the mega crossover, known as... In 1992, the Batman creative team at DC Comics started to develop the idea for a storyline where Batman would be defeated and replaced. The storyline was called Nightfall, and by the end of 1992, they began publishing the prelude to Nightfall, where they created Azrael and Bane, setting the stage for the inevitable downfall of a tired and burned out Batman.
My earliest memory of Nightfall was probably the Death of Superman comics. It was an ad for Bane, the man who finally breaks the Batman, and I remember thinking as a kid that, oh no, they're killing off Batman too, and I was just really ticked off because, I mean, Batman was always my favorite superhero. I was okay with Superman dying. I did not want Batman to die.
Their prelude to Nightfall took place in both the Batman and Detective Comics series, where the writers and artists introduced Bane for the first time to the mainstream continuity in Detective Comics number 656. The following 2 issues of Detective Comics focused on the deteriorated physical and mental state of Batman, who was slowly consumed by his burnout, while Robin trained Azrael in the proper ways of a vigilante. Meanwhile, the Batman series focused on developing Bane as a real threat, and after having him brutally beat Killer Croc, his next target was the Riddler in issue number 490, where Bane injects Riddler with a variant version of the Venom drug, and Batman has to match brains and brawn with a muscle-bound, irrational Riddler, who is seriously injured by Bane's henchmen at the end of the story. The prelude to Nightfall culminates in Batman number 491, where Bane and his henchmen orchestrate a massive breakout from Arkham Asylum, allowing the most dangerous enemies of Batman to roam free and present the ultimate challenge for an already weakened Dark Knight, who has to watch helplessly how the madness that he fought so hard to contain is now loose in his city. This particular plot point seems to have been borrowed from Batman number 400 from 1986, where another criminal mastermind released the Arkham inmates to defeat Batman. This shouldn't be a surprise, as the writer of both Batman number 400 and Batman number 491 is Doug Moench, a writer who liked to recycle ideas. The massive breakout from Arkham Asylum is the final piece of the puzzle, before Nightfall was completely set in motion. The crossover was told in 22 chapters over the course of 6 months. The first half of the crossover became known as The Broken Bat, as it focused on the ultimate downfall of Batman. The Broken Bat is primarily a crossover between Batman and Detective Comics that follows Batman and Robin as they confront some of the most notable enemies, like the Mad Hatter, the Ventriloquist, Amygdala, Mr. Zsasz, Killer Croc, a new and improved version of Firefly, Poison Ivy, the Riddler, and the combined forces of the Scarecrow and the Joker. This was all part of Bane's master plan to weaken Batman before their final encounter in Batman number 497, which marks the ending of the first half of Nightfall. In this issue, Batman suffers a brutal defeat at the hands of Bane, who invades Wayne Manor and the Batcave to make his victory that much more humiliating. In the end, Batman's back is broken, and the Dark Knight is defeated for good.
A lot of people, when they think of Nightfall, that's the first thing they think of, is that image, that iconic scene that sticks in your brain of Batman having his back broken by Bane, so much so it was even used in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight Rises.
The second half of Nightfall is known as Who Rules the Night, as it is focused on Bane's rise to the top of Gotham's underworld and Azrael's possession of the Mantle of the Bat in order to defeat Bane. Unlike the first half, Who Rules the Night is a crossover between multiple series, including Batman, Detective Comics, Shadow of the Bat, and Showcase 93, which includes a Two-Face story in the form of a flashback that shows a previous encounter between Batman and Two-Face, the only major villain who was absent in the first half of Nightfall. In this chapter, Azrael and Robin manage to save Bruce's life, but his injuries are beyond healing by any known science, forcing a permanently paralyzed Bruce to make a decision and choose Azrael as his successor. In the meantime, Bane forms an alliance with Catwoman to keep control of the stolen goods of Gotham. This story development, as well as the newfound popularity of Catwoman thanks to the movie Batman Returns, allowed DC Comics to create the first solo series for Catwoman in the summer of 1993. The series was initially written by Joe Duffy and illustrated by Jim Ballant, and it was heavily focused on the sex appeal of the character, following the sexy portrayal of Catwoman by Michelle Pfeiffer. Though the Catwoman series was not initially part of the Nightfall crossover, many of the events in those first 5 issues were heavily connected to the situation around Batman and Gotham City during Nightfall, and forced readers to catch up with what was going on in the main Batman titles. Meanwhile, Shadow of the Bat was completely absorbed by the crossover, starting with issue number 16 with a 3-part Scarecrow storyline called The God of Fear. The story follows Azrael in his new role as Batman, working to stop the Scarecrow and making an unlikely alliance with Anarchy. In that story, Azrael starts to show signs of being a dangerous vigilante, which is further reinforced in the following issues of Batman and Detective Comics, where he designs and creates a couple of metallic gauntlets with sharp claws as fingers and powerful batarang throwers. Robin starts to realize that choosing Azrael to become Batman was a mistake, but there's nothing he can do as Bruce Wayne starts a journey across the world to rescue Tim Drake's father and Dr. Chandra Kingsolving, the doctor that was in charge of him and with whom Bruce started to fall in love with. With Bruce out of Gotham, Azrael challenges Bane, but is defeated in their first encounter and returns to the Batcave, where the system kicks in and creates a whole new armored batsuit that helps him endure damage in combat as well as inflict more pain on his opponents. The character design of this new Batman and his armor was done by Joe Quesada, the co-creator of Azrael. At that point, everything seemed to point out to the fact that Quesada was going to become the main Batman artist when the new Batman took over. Quesada was even in charge of creating the cover for Batman number 500, where the new Batman would make his official first appearance. Unfortunately, the early sketches for the cover were leaked, and then Wizard magazine asked Quesada to create a cover for their 24th issue featuring the new armored Batman. Quesada did so, thinking that it was approved by DC Comics, but when the Batman editorial team found out, they contacted Wizard magazine and asked them to obscure the new Batman, as to avoid spoiling the readers. Even though this misunderstanding was cleared and the cover of Wizard magazine number 24 was obscured, the damage was done and Joe Quesada was banned from working on the Batman comics. This series of unfortunate events didn't stop the massive appeal of Nightfall, and the final confrontation between Asbats and Bane took place in Batman number 500, the landmark issue that introduced the new Batman to the world. The first half of the issue was illustrated by Jim Aparo, and the second half of the story was done by Mike Manley, the new Batman artist. Batman number 500 is the final issue of Jim Aparo's run as the main Batman artist, something that the Batman editor Denny O'Neil intended from the very start of Nightfall. Jim Aparo had been one of the best and most endearing Batman artists for almost 3 decades, and in order to show his gratitude, Denny O'Neil wanted Jim Aparo involved in issues number 497 and number 500 of Batman, knowing perfectly well that those issues were going to sell millions of copies, generating much-deserved royalties for the legendary Batman artist. Batman number 500 also marks the official ending of Nightfall, as the new Batman is established and a new era on the Batman comics began. It was called Night Quest, and it would showcase the new Batman operating in Gotham City, with a new set of values that were much different from the original Batman. The original idea of Nightfall was to replace Bruce Wayne with a new Batman, in order to give the comic book fans of the 90s what they thought they wanted. Back then, characters like the Punisher and Wolverine were hugely popular, and the comic book fanbase demanded that Batman should be more like them. And so the Batman editor and his team created Azrael, the Batman of the new generation. Over the course of the Night Quest storyline, O'Neil and his team would give the people what they wanted, and show them why it was not going to work. Night Quest started strong in this direction, with Asbats immediately throwing Robin out of the Batcave, almost killing him in the process. This Batman worked alone, and in turn, this development allowed DC Comics to create yet another solo series, this time for Robin. In his title, Robin confronted his own enemies and developed different friendships outside of the Batman universe. Meanwhile, Asbats became more unhinged with each passing issue, brutally attacking his enemies and leaving them near death, like he did with Bane in Batman number 500, the Tallyman in Shadow of the Bat number 20, and Mekros in Batman number 502. This new attitude did not go unnoticed in Gotham, as very quickly there were people who realized this was not the same Batman. Among these people were Catwoman and the Joker, who were certain that this was a new person, while Commissioner Gordon still had his doubts about him.
Everybody was very hyped about this new Batman, Azrael, and he was mean, he was dark and gritty, and that was kind of what Image Comics and a lot of Marvel Comics and a lot of DC also was doing at the time. And by the time Night Quest came around, DC intentionally made Azrael a very unlikable character. He kicked Tim Drake out of the Batcave. He became a real jerk.
The Batman editor Denny O'Neil and his team of writers and artists wanted to make everyone think that this change was going to be permanent by keeping Bruce Wayne completely out of the picture, but the higher-ups at DC Comics didn't allow it. They forced O'Neil and the Batman team to create a separate storyline to follow Bruce Wayne and make it clear that he was going to return at some point. For this reason, Night Quest was separated in 2 parts, the Crusade, which would follow Asbats, and the Surge, which would follow Bruce Wayne. The Surge begins in issues number 5 and 6 of Justice League Task Force, where Bruce travels to Santa Prisca following the trail of Jack Drake and Chandra King Solving. The story then continues in issues number 21, 22, and 23 of Shadow of the Bat, where Bruce tracks down Chandra all the way to England and learns that she has special healing powers. The story also introduces her brother as the main antagonist of the Surge. 1993 ends the year right in the middle of Night Quest, with Asbats struggling to find his own identity and slowly descending into a path of chaos and violence, while Bruce tries to leave his past life behind him, without success. The Nightfall saga ends its 2nd year and it's not nearly done yet, which shows the tremendous editorial coordination of the Batman team back in 1993, a year that absolutely defined and changed the course of the Batman history. In the next video, we will take a look at the Batman history in 1994. But for now, if you enjoyed this documentary and you'd like to see more videos like this one, then please consider joining my Patreon, where you will get your name on the credits, early access, behind-the-scenes content, and the chance to be a part of one of these videos. Speaking of which, a very special thanks to Mike Irish and Wall Scaler Batman for lending their voices to this documentary, as well as Rod Hanna and Brayton Hogan for their incredible support. So, what did you like the most about the 1993 history of Batman? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Batman videos every month.